I still remember the exact moment I realized something was horribly wrong. I had just come home after being away for a few days, visiting a friend out of town, hoping for a quiet evening to rest and catch up on life. I reached into my pocket for my keys, the familiar jingle echoing in the hallway of my apartment building, or at least it usually did, but this time nothing felt right. I inserted my key into the lock, and it didn't turn. Not even a little. I tried again, harder this time, hoping maybe I had just been careless or the lock had jammed somehow. But the stubborn resistance of the lock told me this wasn't just a minor inconvenience. My chest tightened. Confused and shaking, I stepped back, glanced around the dimly lit corridor, and called my son. The moment he picked up, I forced a calmness I didn't feel, trying not to let my panic leak into my voice. "Hey, honey," I said, "can you come open the door for me? My key, it's not working." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a pause so heavy and strange that my stomach sank. "Mom, I changed the locks," he said finally, almost too casually, as if he were announcing the weather. I froze mid-breath, a cold wave rushing over me. "You? What?" I croaked. "I changed the locks. You're not supposed to come back yet." He continued, and I could hear the hesitation, the underlying tension in his voice. My mind was spinning. Why would he do that? I was his mother, my own son, and suddenly I felt more like a stranger trying to break into someone else's home than a parent coming home after a few days. Was I wrong for even being upset? Was I overreacting? Tell me, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I think back to the days leading up to this moment, and I can still see the series of events that probably led him to do something so unthinkable. My son, David, had always been a bit difficult, especially after his father passed away. He was just 12 at the time, and I had to step into two roles at once, both mother and father, which was exhausting and emotionally draining. Over the years, as he grew into his teenage years, we had our fair share of arguments about grades, friends, and his attitude, but nothing that had ever suggested he would completely cut me out of his life. I mean, I thought we were close. We laughed, we cried together, and I had always tried to respect his privacy and space, even when it was hard. But lately, there had been tension. A tension I dismissed at first, thinking it was just him being a teenager, a phase, or me being too sensitive. I didn't realize it was escalating into something far more serious. Earlier that week, I had been away for a short trip, and during those few days, my son had apparently made some big decisions on his own. I had assumed he was doing homework, maybe catching up with friends, but the truth was much more complicated, and I was about to find out just how complicated. I remember the exact call that led to the changes. A week before, I had casually asked him if he needed anything from the store. His tone had been clipped, almost hostile, which had surprised me. "Mom, I don't need anything," he said, voice sharp. I paused for a moment, sensing something was off, but then I shook it off, telling myself he was just stressed with school. I didn't realize that the subtle signs of resentment, frustration, and secrecy were all building up to this explosive point. The day I got the call about the lock, I felt my hands tremble. My mind raced. Had I done something to push him away? I tried to remember if I had been too harsh, too strict, too intrusive, but nothing concrete came to mind. I had always tried to be fair. I had always tried to guide him with love, and yet here I was, standing outside my own home, feeling rejected, confused, and deeply hurt. I thought about calling the police, about trying to force the door open, but something stopped me. It was David, my own son. Even if I was scared, even if I was angry, the thought of confronting him like that made me hesitate. Instead, I paced back and forth in the hallway, trying to calm myself, trying to reason through the impossible. Eventually, I called my best friend, someone I trusted completely, and spilled everything in a torrent of disbelief. He changed the locks. "I can't believe it," I said, my voice shaking, tears threatening to spill over. My friend listened quietly, letting me get everything out before she responded. "Wakas," she said finally, using my name like she always did when she wanted me to listen carefully. "You need to approach this carefully. He's your son, but clearly something's wrong. You need to talk to him, understand what's going on before anything else." Her words were wise, but they didn't make it easier. How do you even begin to talk to a child who has literally locked you out of your own home? How do you approach someone who has taken a step so extreme without losing your mind in the process? I tried reasoning with him over the phone, my voice a mixture of pleading and confusion. "David, please, can you just let me in? We need to talk. I don't understand why you're doing this." Another long pause. And then came the words that stung worse than anything I could imagine. "Mom, I need space. I can't deal with things the way they were before. I need to feel safe in my own home." Safe? I felt my heart shatter. Safe from what? From me, from his own mother. And then I realized that whatever had been festering under the surface, whatever anger, resentment, or fear he had been holding on to, had finally boiled over. And somehow, I had been completely oblivious. That night, I sat on the cold steps outside the building, trying to gather my thoughts. I watched the streetlights flicker, casting long shadows that mirrored the darkness I felt inside. I thought about every moment we had shared, every argument, every laugh, every hug, every tear. Was it really possible that I had been blind to his feelings all this time? Had I failed him in ways I didn't even know? My mind spun in circles. I wanted to cry, to scream, to beg for answers. But I also knew that whatever I did next had to be careful, calculated, and, above all, loving. I spent the night on my phone, scrolling through old messages, old photos, trying to find clues. There were tiny things I had missed. Brief mentions of stress, half-hearted excuses for missing calls, subtle hints that he was withdrawing, isolating himself. And now all of it had culminated in this one moment, him changing the locks, creating a barrier between us that I had never imagined possible. I called him again the next morning, trying a gentler approach. "David," I said softly, "I don't understand why you feel you have to do this. I'm your mother. I love you. Please, just talk to me." He was quiet for a long time, and I could hear his hesitation, his inner conflict, through the phone. Finally, he said, almost whispering, I don't know if I can." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Not that he didn't love me, not that he didn't care, but that he felt trapped in a situation where he couldn't be himself around me, where he felt threatened or unheard or simply unheard. I realized then that this wasn't just about locks or keys or control. It was about emotions, trust, and boundaries that had been mismanaged for years without me even noticing. I reached out to a family therapist that day, someone who had helped other parents navigate difficult situations with teenagers. She listened to the entire story, asked pointed questions, and then said something I will never forget. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones we hurt the most without realizing it. And sometimes it takes a dramatic action to wake us up. Her words echoed in my mind as I went back to my apartment building, pacing in the hallway, trying to summon the courage to face my son. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted understanding. I wanted connection. I wanted my son back, not just physically, behind a door, but emotionally as well. That's when I decided I needed to go deeper, to understand the root of the problem. I started piecing together his life over the past months, who he had been spending time with, what pressures he faced at school, the subtle hints of anxiety I had ignored. I remembered one day, just weeks before my trip, when I found his school notebook open on the table. There were sketches, scribbles, little notes about feeling trapped, feeling unheard, feeling scared. I had glanced at it and dismissed it as teenage angst. Now, every scribble seemed like a desperate cry for help I had failed to see. And as I pieced everything together, I realized that this wasn't just about him being difficult. It was about him trying to assert control over a part of his life he felt he had no say in. And unfortunately, I had been part of the problem. So that's the situation I was in, standing outside my own home, unable to enter, trying to make sense of everything while my own son's words echoed in my head. I need space. I can't deal with things the way they were before. I need to feel safe. It was a turning point. I had a choice to make: force my way in and risk breaking his trust forever, or step back, listen, and try to rebuild the relationship from the outside in. I wanted to scream, cry, plead, but instead I took a deep breath, sat down on the steps again, and made a plan. I decided to approach this with patience, love, and careful strategy. I would not let anger or frustration dictate my actions. My son needed me, not just as a mother, but as someone who could truly understand and support him. And that realization, that I needed to change my approach completely, was both terrifying and liberating. Before I move forward, I want to ask you again: if you were in my position, standing outside your own home, locked out by your child, confused and shaken, what would you do? Would you try to force your way in, or would you step back and try to understand what led them to take such an extreme step? Pause for a moment and think about it, because the decision I made next was not easy, and it changed everything. I spent the rest of that day outside my apartment, pacing, thinking, trying to come up with a way to reach my son without making him feel cornered or attacked. Every time someone walked past me in the hallway, I flinched, half expecting them to think I was some kind of intruder, which, in a way, I felt like I was. I couldn't stop thinking about his words: I need space. I can't deal with things the way they were before. I need to feel safe. I had repeated them over and over in my mind like a mantra, trying to understand what safe meant to him. Safe from what? From me. From the life I had thought I had given him. A home filled with love, structure, and guidance. It didn't make sense, and yet, as the evening shadows grew longer and the city lights flickered on one by one, I realized that this wasn't about me being right or wrong. It was about him, his feelings, and how I had failed to see them before it got to this point. I decided to go to the local café that David liked. Maybe, I thought, if I could catch him in a neutral space, away from the house and the pressure, we could finally talk. I had to approach this carefully, though. I needed to plan my words, my tone, my approach. I reminded myself repeatedly: calm, patient, loving, nothing else would work. When I walked in, my heart skipped a beat. There he was, sitting in his usual spot near the window, headphones in, staring at his laptop, completely absorbed in something I couldn't see. He didn't notice me at first, which was probably a blessing. I took a deep breath, walked over slowly, and waited until he looked up. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw a mixture of defiance, guilt, and something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or maybe it was sadness. "Hey," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm and neutral. "Can we talk for a minute?" He hesitated, took off his headphones, and gave me a cautious nod. "I don't want a lecture," he said immediately, and the firmness in his voice made my heart ache. "I just want to understand." I nodded. "I don't want a lecture either. I just want to understand. I want to know what made you feel like you had to change the locks, like you had to push me away." He looked down at his hands for a long moment, then finally said, I felt trapped, Mom, like I couldn't breathe, like everything I did was wrong, and I couldn't do anything right, and I didn't know how else to make you understand." Those words hit me harder than anything else in this entire ordeal. Trapped. My son felt trapped in his own home, and the realization that I had somehow contributed to that feeling made me feel sick. I wanted to cry, but I held it in. I had to be strong for him, even if my heart was breaking. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us trying to process the weight of the conversation. Finally, I spoke. "David, I didn't know. I didn't realize you felt trapped. I thought I was helping, guiding you, but I see now that I wasn't listening enough. I wasn't giving you space to express yourself, to make mistakes, to just be you." He nodded slowly, and I could see the tension in his shoulders start to ease just slightly. I know I wasn't perfect. I continued, but I love you more than anything in this world, and I never want you to feel unsafe around me. Can we try to fix this together? He looked at me for a long, long moment, then finally said, I think I want that too, but I'm scared it'll just happen again. I reached across the table, took his hand gently in mine, and squeezed it. I understand, I said softly, and I promise, I will listen, really listen, no judgments, no assumptions, just us, talking and figuring it out. That small gesture seemed to break some invisible barrier between us. I could see the relief in his eyes, the first sign of trust beginning to rebuild. After that meeting at the café, we started to take small steps. I made a conscious effort to step back, to let him make decisions about his life, his friends, his routines, without hovering or judging. I asked questions instead of giving orders. I listened instead of reacting. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to open up. One day, he invited me over to his room, something he hadn't done in months. I could see the nervousness in his posture, the way he avoided eye contact, but he was reaching out. And that was all I needed to keep going, to keep trying, to keep showing him that I wasn't going to force my way in or control him. I was there for him, unconditionally. Of course, it wasn't easy. There were setbacks. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments where I felt the old tension creeping back in. But each time, I reminded myself why I was doing this. I reminded myself that it wasn't about being right. It wasn't about who had more power in the house or who got their way. It was about love, understanding, and trust, the very things I had almost lost. And every time we managed to talk through an issue, to come to a compromise, or to just sit in silence without feeling fear or resentment, I felt hope growing. Hope that we could rebuild what had been broken. Then came the moment that truly tested us. One evening, a few weeks after the lock incident, I got a call from him. "Mom, can you come over?" he asked, voice hesitant. I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. Something told me this was important. When I arrived, he met me at the door, standing nervously with an envelope in his hands. I wanted to give this back to you," he said, handing me the envelope. Inside was a copy of the old keys, neatly labeled, along with a note. My hands trembled as I read it. "Mom, I don't want to lock you out again. I just needed you to understand how I felt. I love you." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I hugged him tightly, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief and connection I had feared lost forever. From that day forward, things slowly returned to normal. Well, a new normal. The kind of normal that comes from understanding, forgiveness, and growth. I realized that sometimes the people we love the most need to take drastic steps, not out of malice, but out of desperation, just to be seen and heard. And sometimes it takes a parent's patience, humility, and willingness to listen to truly reconnect. My son and I rebuilt our relationship brick by brick, conversation by conversation, with each small gesture of trust strengthening the bond that had almost been broken forever. Looking back, I can see the lessons in all of this clearly. First, always listen, really listen, even when you think you understand. Second, respect boundaries, even when they're hard to accept. Third, love doesn't always mean being in control. Sometimes it means stepping back and letting the person you care about find their own way. And finally, never underestimate the strength and wisdom of your children. They can teach you more about empathy, patience, and love than you could ever imagine. So if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, standing outside your own home, locked out by the person you love most, remember this. Take a deep breath, don't react with anger, and try to understand. Approach with patience, with love, and with the genuine desire to reconnect. You might just find that the door they closed was never meant to keep you out forever. It was meant to teach both of you something important about trust, respect, and communication. If you were on my side, struggling through something that felt impossible, but choosing to approach it with love instead of anger, like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, stories that make you feel, that make you think, and that remind us all of the complexity and beauty of family. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I want to know what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have reacted differently? Would you have understood sooner? I'll see you all in the next story.